Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the next series of our nonprofit workshop. We're just switching over screens at this point. So while we're doing that, let me do some administrative housekeeping. While Kim brings up and shares her obviously screen and the slides. First, you're all on mute. If you have any questions, and we really do encourage you to ask questions, please go to the Q&A box either at the bottom of your screen or at the top, depending on your device. We will answer those questions as we go through the presentation. Both the slide presentation and the workshop recording will be sent to all registered participants, but so if you need any of our previous workshops, which we'll have a list at the end of this, please email Ellen Maloney at scorevolunteer.org and she'll be happy to send those to you. Also, we will be sending out a questionnaire at the end of this workshop. Please fill it out, as well as making any suggestions or any questions you might have. We do look at these so that when we're planning next year's workshop, we know what obviously topics were of interest to you. Next slide, please, Kim. And we really do. This is a state compliance, finances, and red flag topics for nonprofits. And we're delighted to have Kim Wickersham here from the state, and she will obviously introduce herself, but it is our nonprofit workshop series. We do this every year, generally in the fall. And we do want to thank Coastal States Bank for being the sponsor of this. They have been a wonderful partner, not only for SCORE, but obviously for all of the people who are here. Someone is asking how long is this section? The workshop is about an hour, but again, if you can't stay for the whole hour, is that you will receive the recording and the PowerPoint at this point. Next slide, please. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kim to introduce herself and obviously start the presentation.
Thank you very much, Karen, and welcome everyone. I'm so happy to be here today representing the Secretary of State's office here in South Carolina. We're located up in Columbia, right in the middle of the state. I have been with the Secretary of State's office since 2009. I started as a business filings representative, helping everyone file their articles of incorporation, and quickly moved to the charities division in 2011. Part of my responsibility is overseeing the administrative responsibilities, in other words, helping get things filed. I have a team of 7 here that I work with, and also the enforcement actions related to the nonprofit Charitable Funds Act and Raffles Act in our office. That's what we oversee here. I've got some experience outside the office as the National Association of State Charity Officials Treasurer. It's a conglomeration of all the states' Secretary of State's office and Attorney General's, all the offices that oversee charitable registrations and enforcement actions. I am part of that group. I'm going to go ahead and give you a lot of information today. We're going to talk briefly about statutory requirements, transparency, fundraising, financial reporting, some red flags for you to watch out for, and some best practices for you as you begin or continue on your journey as a nonprofit corporation. So let's go ahead and get started, and we're going to talk about the Solicitation of Charitable Funds Act and who must register. So anyone in the state of South Carolina that is going to do any kind of fundraising or requesting of grants is required to register with our office. You have to file a registration each year and follow up with a financial report. Some organizations qualify for exemption. We'll get into those details in a few minutes. And also in addition to charitable organizations, professional fundraisers must register with us as well. A fundraiser would include a solicitor company, someone who you hire to go out and ask for contributions on behalf of your organization. Maybe you hire someone to do a bingo. That's a solicitor company. Commercial co-venture. You might, Belk's Charity Days. You might buy something at the store where an organization says, hey, if you buy our product, we're going to give 5% of the proceeds back to charity. That's a commercial co-venture. Those people all have to register with us. So we'll talk a little bit of detail about that, but first, let's go ahead and I am going to talk about who must register, but let's jump real quick to a handout that you're going to be given. And it is going to talk about those of you who maybe have not yet started your nonprofit and you're thinking about, well, how do I get started? Let's start with giving you some instructions here on this form. You'll have this form given to you. It has links in it to our website at the Secretary of State's office that is for business filings. So you'll want to start by filing articles of incorporation. Those are a quick, simple 3-page form. It tells you tell us the name of your organization, you have to have a registered agent, where your organization is located, and what kind of a nonprofit are you going to be? Are you going to be a public benefit, a mutual benefit, or a religious organization? Not a lot of information on the form, but those are the basics. And then you're going to say whether or not you intend to get tax exempt status, be a 501c3 with the IRS. That designation is from the IRS. The nonprofit corporation designation is from our office. So there's 2 different activities that you have to do to get started. One would be the filing of your articles of incorporation, which is in this section here. And then when you've got that done, you will tie up your name. In other words, no one else can use your name once you register with us. So then once that's done, then you go ahead and jump to the section below for applying for your EIN number. Now you want to make sure that you don't get your EIN number first, because if your name can't be used with our office because someone else is already using it, but you've already gotten an EIN number with that name, you would have to then change the name registered with the IRS. So do these in the proper order. Get your articles of incorporation first, then your EIN number. And then once you get those 2 things, even if you haven't yet filed for tax exempt status with the IRS, you are able to start fundraising as long as you register with the Secretary of State's office to fundraise. So let me go back to our presentation here, and we will start by who must file. So any organization that is going to register or going to solicit contributions in the state, again, that includes having a donate button on a website, asking for solicitation out in the public, soliciting grants. Anytime you're going to do any kind of fundraising, you have to be registered with our office. The registration costs $50, and there's a possible fine of $2,000 if you're caught fundraising without being properly registered with our office. When you register, you're going to have to provide not only the name of the organization and the person that's completing the registration and will be the contact for the organization, but there are other things that you'll have to disclose to us, like whether the organization has been the subject of a legal or administrative action concerning other charitable solicitations or fundraising campaigns, either in this state or in another state. You'll have to disclose whether or not any of the organization's officers, directors, trustees, or board members have been the subject of criminal conviction, again, involving any solicitation, dishonesty, or a false statement. And then you're going to need to disclose whether or not any of the organization's officers, directors, trustees, or board members are related by blood, marriage, or adoption to each other, or any director or officer of a professional fundraising council. So in South Carolina, you have a nonprofit, and of course you're going to have a board. In South Carolina, you're required to have at least 3 board members, 3 directors or board members, officers for your nonprofit corporation. And so when you register with us and the IRS, they're going to want to know, are any of these people family members? And so you have to disclose this. And when we talk about family members, we're talking about whether you're related by blood, marriage, or adoption. Now, and then the family can be as what we typically would think of our families: brothers, sisters, parents, correct? And then we have grandparents. And then once you get into aunts and uncle, now you're starting to get outside of what the formal family structure would be. Now, family member does include a husband, obviously. It could include son and daughter-in-laws. It just depends on if your state that you're in has specific requirements there, Ours, this is what we ask right here. It's just blood, marriage, or adoption. This is where we go when we talk about, are you related to each other? So if you have any of these three types here, that's what you have to disclose in South Carolina. With the IRS, their registration question regarding family is pretty similar. I don't think they go much farther than us. They do the typical brothers, sisters, parents, grandparents, and aunts and uncles is where they start to go, well, we take a look at it, but it's not as close as that typical family marriage blood relationship.
And Kim, just to add to that, going back to the IRS, and I know this
Uh-huh.
is the state requirement, the IRS requires that less than 50% of your board is related by blood, going back to the definitions that Kim just mentioned. So if you're starting a board with the initial 3 people and 2 are blood related, husband and wife, husband and son, whatever, you are out of compliance with the IRS. So
I'm sorry, go ahead.
so do keep that in mind. And then the second thing is do keep in mind is that let's say you have 7 people on your board and 2 are related by blood. That's fine. But if you go to have a vote and your quorum is 4 people, and of the 4 people who show up, 2 are related by blood, that vote is invalid based on IRS rules. Now, how does the IRS know all this? Well, honestly, for small ones, they're probably not going to look at small nonprofits, but for larger nonprofits, they will do reviews of your documentation of meetings and obviously other things. So just do keep that in mind that while there are South Carolina rules, there is also rules for the IRS.
That's a great point, Karen. And South Carolina, we when we register the organization, when the organization registers and we review and approve, we do not allow the registration just because someone reports family members. For the state requirement, you're just required to report them. So there's no other action that we would take related to the family member question on there. All right, so sometimes an organization will not be required to file a registration statement because of certain criteria that they meet, and they may be able to file an application for exemption. So an exemption exists for certain organizations. For instance, PTAs are covered by the parent PTA of South Carolina group. So you might not find an individual PTA registered with us, but you will find PTOs. If you're a church is not required to file a registration statement with us, and nor are they required to file a 990 EZ or any kind of a 990 form with the IRS, and therefore they're not required to register with us. We also have exemptions for educational organizations, memberships and veterans organizations soliciting less than 7,500 or 20,000, for the state or agencies that are subject to FOIA, or people who are soliciting requests on behalf of an individual. This would be like if you had someone who, was sick and they were trying to raise funds for maybe some medical treatment. Those kinds of things need to be registered with us as well. Now, exemptions. Oftentimes we hear the word exemption and we think, well, that means that we don't have to do something. But in South Carolina, the word exemption means you don't complete a registration statement and pay the $50, but you do file a registration form called an application for exemption. So it doesn't mean you don't do anything. It means that you just fill out a different form. Okay? The form that has to be followed up after the fiscal year end, 4.5 months later, is the annual financial report form. Or if an organization files a 990 form, the long form, the short EZ form, or a private foundation PF form, those forms can be submitted to our office for a financial report form. If the organization fills out a 990N postcard return, we don't take those because those postcard returns don't actually have any financial data on them to share with the public. So we have an annual financial report form that can be used instead of the postcard return. We will take those. So let's jump out really quick to my next attachment, which is going to talk about when things are required with our office. And we have got a sample sheet here is because we're coming upon the renewal period for people who have a June 30 fiscal year end. It's the second most popular fiscal year end date for organizations to have. So if you're an organization that has a June 30 fiscal year end, you are going to be required to renew your registration every year on November 15th and file one of two things. You can file your financial report on one of these forms here, or you can file an extension request for 6 months extension of time to file the financial report, not to renew the registration. So your registrations are always due 4.5 months after the end of your fiscal year, and your financial report must be submitted at that time, or an extension request has to be submitted at that time, one of those two things, in addition to your registration. So if you have a fiscal year end of December 31st, your renewal deadline is May 15th. So all the people that are currently in the middle of their fiscal year end or winding down their fiscal year in December of 2024 and in May of 25, their registration will be due. Now you can register with us as soon as your fiscal year begins. So for organizations that are fiscal year end of December, in January, they can renew their registration in advance and then follow up with their financial report or extension requests no later than May 15th. In addition to the registration for a charitable organization, the organizations that conduct raffles, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later in the slides, anyone conducting raffles will be required to file at the same time as their charity renewal. So you need to renew at the same time as your charity. So June 30 fiscal year ends, register in November, December 31st fiscal year end, register in May. The fine for failing to register a raffle that needs to be registered, a non-exempt raffle, is $500. Just so you know, we will communicate with you before anything comes due. So about the first week in April for May filers, the first week of October for November filers, we will send you an email, the contact an email telling you that your renewal time is coming, and we let you know exactly what's due, the registration, financial report, extension. If you miss that day, we send you a reminder 30 days after the due date saying, we see that you haven't registered, just a friendly reminder. And then if that day comes and we still don't have anything, then we start a violation process, and we will send letters out to organizations letting them know that they've missed a filing deadline and what they can do to resolve it. There are penalties. They can be steep, but they are graduated, and we offer you a grace period to resolve it without having any kind of a fine. Just make sure you reach out to our office if you have any questions and you get a letter like that. All right, I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint here. And as far as what else
some questions, Kim.
Yep.
What should an organization do if it misses a filing deadline?
So if they miss a filing deadline and they get one of our letters, respond to the letter by either email or calling us, or just jump onto your online dashboard and complete your filing. Your dashboard is open 24/7 for your records to either review and see what is happening with your file, or to complete a registration or submit a filing that you've missed. If you haven't received anything from us notifying you that something is missing, it may just be that we haven't gotten all the letters out yet. You can still at any time call us, email us, but most importantly, log into your dashboard and see what's missing, because on your dashboard, you will see, you will be able to check and see what's happening. And I can go ahead and pull that what that looks like for you up here. This is a picture of what your dashboard will look like when you log in. Have your charity's name. It'll tell you your current status. So if you see expired and you haven't submitted your registration yet, it's going to say expired, and then you'll know to hit the activate or renew button and take care of your renewal. If you've submitted something, but we haven't reviewed it yet, which can happen in our busy periods, it's going to say pending instead of expired. But if you've submitted, we've approved it, it's going to say your current status is active up here at the top. But at any time during the year, you can log in and you can see each of these tabs does something different. If you have a change in contact, you can update that here on the screen using one of these links here. You can change your address. You can update officers and board members through the year. Add a document. If you didn't have tax exempt status, but now you do, you can go ahead and upload that document here. And if you have a name change, you can do that here. But you can also see if your financial reports are filed, if you have any outstanding violations, you can change your email, your password, and log out, of course.
And Kim, this is a follow-up question. I think you've answered it a little bit. What if an organization misses a filing deadline but doesn't receive any letters?
Well, that might be because the contact is no longer the current contact for the organization. So that does happen. If you have an organization that maybe has had some turnover, and if Karen, you were the contact for an organization and you have moved on to another opportunity, but our office still shows you as the contact, you're actually going to still continue to get those reminders and those letters until someone changes the contact with our office. And that can be done by logging in again and updating it on your dashboard, or by simply sending us an email, and we'll be happy to update that information for you.
Okay. Another question. What should an organization do if they receive a violation letter from the Secretary of State?
Call us. Call us. You're welcome to go in and take care of the issue if you know what you need to do. If you've got a report, you forgot to upload it, you can upload it. But we always say reach out to us, because our goal is to help you be successful by staying in compliance. The last thing we want is you to get frozen and not know what to do and do nothing. And that sometimes is the case for people because they get a little bit unnerved by a letter that they might get from us. But really, we really want you to reach out to us. We are happy to help. We will work with you. Even if there's a fine involved, we are very generous, in our willingness to really kind of look at the situation and reduce fines. And even in some cases, we can waive them if it's like the first fine for an organization.
And you may be answering this question on this slide, but who's responsible for filing the contract with a fundraising company?
So that would be the professional fundraiser. So whether it's the PFR or the commercial co-venture, they are required to have a signed agreement with you, with the charitable organization, and then they're responsible for filing that with our office. They have to maintain a registration just like the charitable organization does. If we receive a contract with between a charitable organization and a PFR or a CCV, and if one or both of them are not registered, both will end up with a violation letter sent out. But if everyone's registered, we file the contract that is submitted by the PFR or the CCV, and then they have to subsequently file a joint financial report with our office 90 days after the end of the contract or the 1-year anniversary. So if you sign a contract with someone and you get, it's maybe longer than a year. So then 1 day from its anniversary start date, 90 days later, they owe us a financial report, a joint financial report for the first year of the contract. But if you have a contract that's only going to last maybe a month or two, then once that 2-month period ends, 90 days later, they will submit a joint financial report, and they will get your signature on the joint financial report before they send it in to us. That is so that you see that they are telling us how much money was raised during the event and how much money the charity received. They're going to sign off and say, yes, I agree, we did receive this money. And this is what transpired.
Thank you, Kim. That's the end of the questions. And anyone who's any of the attendees, please put your questions in the Q&A box. We'll be more than happy to obviously address them. Okay, all yours, Kim.
Great. All right, there we go. All right, so how can you find out if your organization is registered with us? These codes will, these QR codes will get you to three places. The first one on the left will take you to our website where you can search a charity's name. So you can search your own organization and see if you're currently registered. It will show the public or whoever searches it will be able to download the most recent financial report you submitted to our office. It tells what percent of your charitable spending goes to your charitable purpose versus overhead and fundraising, and it'll show your current status with our office. So if you look yourself up and it says expired, you know that there's a registration that hasn't been filed. You might want to contact our office and see what's going on and see how you can bring yourself into compliance. The other two QR codes are for Apple and Google phone, Android phones. They will take you to an app that we have that does the same exact thing. So if you, whether you use it for yourself or whether you like to use it when you're out and about and you see some solicitation happening, maybe outside a store, you want to make sure that these people are registered, because part of our job here in the office and gathering the information that we get from you is to provide transparency and accountability from the charitable organizations to the public, to the people that support you. So people who are grant makers, they use these tools to make sure that nonprofits are registered with us, and they actually look at the numbers. They look at what you're spending. They look at your percentage of charitable spending, program spending versus fundraising and management. They will look before they will award grants. The public will call us. They usually call us, especially this last 3 months of the year, because they start thinking about extra giving. And they're looking for people who are registered. They're looking for people that they see maybe commercials on TV. They see someone around town. They might get something in the mail, or it's just someone that they really like to support, and they will check. So these are three ways that we give the public to check and see, is the nonprofit that they want to support in compliance with state law, and then what are they doing with their money? All right, let's talk about fundraising. We provide the public a wise giving and professional solicitors report. So this report gathers all of the information from the joint financial reports that are submitted to our office from the professional fundraisers and solicitors, and it also gathers information from the contracts that are out there that are submitted to our office. Professional solicitors report, I said it covers the last 12 months of the past fiscal year. So then it's not going to be 2024, it'll be 2023 this year when we publish it. We make sure that you want to make sure that you're fundraising, if you're going to use fundraisers, that they're properly registered with our office, and you can search that on our website as well. You want to make sure that you negotiate the best contract if you're going to use someone. So there are some contracts, and I'm going to show you on the next couple pages some of the data that we collect so that you can see the wide range of what is being done out there and how much goes to the charitable organizations. But you want to make sure that you're negotiating the best contract for your organization for the work they're going to do for you in the fundraising. And then finally, you'll have to file a joint financial report. Not you, but the fundraiser or commercial co-venture will, but you will have to sign it. And again, as I stated before, it's confirming that this is in fact what happened on the contract. So let's go ahead and look at these two charts right here. This one is the joint financial report chart. So you can see on here the different fundraising methods on the left-hand side here. So you've got bingos, electronic media. This is someone that may be sending out through emails or on a website. They're doing website or maybe Instagram likes, or it can be any number of things. Sometimes it's door-to-door, as shown here, and then you've got some phone solicitations. We all know what those are. So over here on the right-hand side, you'll see the percentage that goes to charities. So this is going to be very widely ranged. It's going to be, you see a 7.7% up here in the far right. This is one of the bingos. So bingos tend to be a pretty low percentage of the overall receipts. And that has to do with the fact that there's a lot of money that the fundraiser spends to actually conduct the bingo and pay employees to conduct the bingo. But the amount, you can see that the percentage might be low, but the amount that went to the charity is right here listed as $101,000. So you have to make your determination if this is the type of fundraising you want to do. We make no determination in this office on whether something is good or bad. Okay, so we just report the facts of what is being done out there between the fundraiser and the charity. So there's a lot of great fundraising happening out there. And a lot of this is money that the charity might otherwise not have the means to procure on their own through just general soliciting. So each one has to decide how best to fundraise for their own selves. But you can see here what we report on this report here. So down the list on the right-hand side, you'll see some of the percentages. And whoop, let me go back one screen. Some of the percentages get a little bit wonky here. This probably has to do with sometimes you'll have a solicitation campaign where not all of the money is realized in the first year of the campaign. It might be residual money coming in and out or coming in late at a later date for the organization. So you have to kind of take these, with don't panic when you see something like this, but question it is, I guess, the best thing I can say is sometimes there might be an explanation for it, and it can be hard to know when you're just looking at data like this, but this is still great information for you to see that it can be, 52%, and sometimes it's only going to be 12%. And again, it comes down to negotiating and what they're going to do for you. The next screen here shows the contract report, the section of the contract report. So again, it shows that you've got some bingos in here, you've got business to business contact, and this is just kind of gives a brief description in this category column here about how they determine what money the charity gets. This is what they've agreed on. So in this bottom one here, you see it says 50% minimum guaranteed to charity. This is what they're supposed to do. So when we get the JFR, we expect to see that the split is a 50% split for this particular contract. All right, let's move on to raffles, fundraising. So fundraising, well, let me ask first, Karen, did you have any questions related to the fundraising solicitors and CCVs first before we go on?
No, nothing at this point. So
Okay. All right, let's go to raffles then. So nonprofit raffles for charitable purposes, those are just what you think they are. They are raffles. So it wasn't always the case that you could hold a raffle in South Carolina. However, in 2016, they passed a bill that allowed nonprofits only to conduct raffles. So an organization that is a nonprofit corporation that has tax exempt status with the IRS and is organized and for charitable purposes can conduct a raffle. But you have to be one of these specific IRS code sections. So if you're not one of these specific IRS code sections here, you have to be a class or department of an educational institution to conduct a raffle. So they're very specific on who can conduct a raffle. You have to be operated for charitable purposes, like I said, and you have to be in compliance with the Solicitation of Charitable Funds Act. So you have to be in compliance with everything else that I already told you about as far as the charity registration and filing your financial report. As long as all of that is in order and all of these three criteria are met, you can conduct your raffle. I'm going to go back one slide.
and while you're going back, Kim, we do have a question now. When you hold a raffle license in South Carolina and are located in South Carolina, can you conduct a raffle over state lines, or do you have to register in that state as well?
Is a great question, and the answer is yes. You have to register in the other state if they have raffle laws there. So not every state allows the raffles. So it's up to each state. So in North Carolina, for instance, you would need to contact the North Carolina Secretary of State to find out if they have a raffle requirement, registration requirement in North Carolina. But I know people have held raffles in North Carolina and they sell tickets here in South Carolina. They are required to register in South Carolina if they're going to come across state lines and sell tickets to South Carolinians. So the answer is yes, as long as the other state has a registration requirement. Now, if North Carolina doesn't have a raffle law and you're not required or you're not allowed to conduct raffles, so in other words, they have one saying you can't gamble, it's considered a gambling thing, but it's an exclusion from the gambling statute to allow raffles for nonprofits only in South Carolina. So if North Carolina says no, no raffles are allowed, then you cannot sell tickets in North Carolina just because you're registered in South Carolina.
A follow-up question, what about online raffles?
Online raffles are allowed. You're not allowed to use a third party to conduct raffles. In other words, you're not allowed to hire a professional fundraising company, the solicitor, or a commercial entity to conduct a raffle for you. But so there are companies online where you can buy raffle tickets online, and you can sign up your nonprofit to have the raffle tickets done electronically through this online application, and they will actually draw the number for you. At this time, as long as they're not being paid a percentage of the raffle proceeds, you are allowed to do this. You just have to make sure that they're not being used as a third-party fundraiser for the organization to conduct a raffle.
Okay, and then you talk about tax exempt status, but what if you've applied for one but haven't received the IRS letter yet? Can you hold a raffle?
You cannot. You have to wait till you get that letter. So the letter is going to take some time. It depends on whether or not you filed a 1023-EZ, which is an online application, much shorter than your typical exempt status organization, but it is only really for very small organizations. But if you are waiting on the IRS, you have to wait till you have that letter in hand. We will not approve a registration without that physical letter uploaded into our database.
Okay, and we're done for now. You can keep going.
Okay. All right. So remember, often there are so many creative people out there and we love it, but you have to make sure that you understand that if a participant is required to pay something of value for a ticket or a chance to win a prize, and prize being something that you hold in your hand or maybe an experience, but something of value, you are conducting a raffle. Okay, so that is the definition of a raffle per statute. You're required to pay something for a chance to win something. Now, anyone who's conducting a non-exempt raffle, and there's two kinds of exempt raffles. A non-exempt raffle must register. Exempt raffles that are not required to be registered, there's two of them. One is if you are a membership organization that's conducting a 50-50 raffle for members and their guests. And the other one is when you have a raffle that's being conducted where all prizes are donated and the fair market value of all the prizes added up together do not exceed $950. Okay, so those are the two exempt raffles. Other than that, you have to register to conduct a non-exempt raffle. So let's talk a little bit about membership. Members are a membership organization is where someone pays a membership dues to be a part of an organization. It says the solicitation or the Raffle Act says it's for members and their guests. So if you are, let's say, a Rotary Club, and you are having a meeting, one of your luncheon or dinner meetings, and you every week when you meet or monthly, however often it is, you are going to do a 50-50 raffle. The value of the prize or the money can't exceed $950 total to be split in half, and it's only can be considered exempt if it is a membership organization and their guests. So who are their guests? So a Rotary Club, this is a simple example. The guests are the people who have been invited by the Rotary member to come typically they might say, hey, I'd like my new neighbor to possibly join us, be a member of this Rotary Club. I'm going to bring him to one of our meetings so he can see what it's like. That is a guest. Here's an example of not a guest. You have a booster club that is selling 50-50 tickets at a football game. The general public that is coming to the high school football game is not your guest, because the guest cannot be the public in general. It has to be specifically a membership organization and their guests, and it can't be the general public. Okay. And again, the other exempt prize, all prizes can't exceed $9.50 and they have to be donated.
A question, Kim, are
Yep.
silent auctions raffles?
They are not, because silent auctions are just that auctions, you're bidding. You're not purchasing a ticket and then it's going to be drawn for a chance to win that particular prize. Unless there's another kind of a silent auction out there that is not what we are familiar with. Auctions are not required to be registered with our office.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, so nonprofit raffle restrictions. Organizations have to be registered to conduct a raffle. You register not only as a charitable organization, but you register the raffle. And then you must submit a raffle financial report, even if the raffle never took place. So let's say I register for a raffle in 2024. We decide not to hold a raffle in 2024. I'm still required to file a report in by May of next year, but it's just a zero report. You just report that no, there's a question right at the bottom of page 1 that says how many raffles took place. And if you had 0, you put 0, and then you sign the form and send it in or submit it via our online site. Organizations may not enter into a contract with anyone to operate a raffle on behalf of a nonprofit. 2 nonprofits can join forces and can help each other with a raffle, but a for-profit cannot conduct the raffle. Now, we have questions asked where people say, well, my friend's art studio wants to sell raffle tickets for us. That is fine. They're not conducting the raffle. The nonprofit is conducting the raffle. The art studio can sell tickets to help them with their sales. Cost of raffle tickets cannot exceed $300. And only 4 non-exempt raffles can be conducted in a calendar year, and 1 exempt raffle can be held every 7 days. So back to those exempts, which are the 50-50 for membership organizations, or the raffles where everything's donated and it doesn't exceed $9.50, the total value of prizes. Those can be conducted 1 every 7 days, and only 4 non-exempt raffles in a year per registration. Nonprofit raffles have to have certain advertisement restrictions. Once you've conducted raffles, there's a requirement that you have to report on your raffle advertisement the purposes that the organization will use the receipts from the raffle, and a statement of the portion of the gross receipts from all the raffles conducted in the most recent 2 years. What portion of those gross receipts were not applied to the charitable purposes of the organization. So if you took in, for round numbers, $1,000 and in total revenue for raffles over the last 2 years, and you look at your financial history and your data, and you can see that you spent maybe $300 on fundraising expenses and management of it, then you have to report that that amount of money was not spent on the charitable purposes of the organization as a result of the raffles. And also make sure that your nonprofit organization's name is on there. Some organizations may have a name such as, let's just use Karen's Community Foundation, but she's going to conduct a raffle and she wants to call it the Big Sky Raffle. You want to make sure that you register your legal name with our office and then a DBA Big Sky Raffle, so that when we see an advertisement, if the public sees it and they call us and say, I can't find this raffle registered, it'll come up in our system because it's listed as a DBA, so people can find a DBA name, especially if you use an acronym for your organization's name. You want to make sure that you get it on the advertisement in the way that it will be searchable in our database. So any questions so far? Raffles, fundraising,
One
opportunities?
question, are casino nights still illegal?
Huh. No, I mean, well, they are illegal, but you cannot conduct a casino night unless it's for bragging rights. So if you conduct a casino night and you have chips on the table, you obviously can't buy the chips. You can't turn the chips in for a prize. Even if you didn't buy them, you're not allowed to turn them in for a prize because you've paid to enter the event. So the issue here is that it's considered gambling and it's still illegal. So you can conduct it, and at the end of the night, all you get are bragging rights. Then you can go ahead and have a casino night. But that is the only circumstance under which casino nights are allowed in the state of South Carolina.
Okay, thank
Does that
you.
make sense? Yeah.
Yep, okay, we're all
Okay.
set.
All right. Okay, financial reporting. I want to spend a little time on this because it takes, it is one of those things that tends to cause people heartache when they're filing because they sometimes don't understand program expenses, management expenses, and fundraising expenses and how they get reported on the report. So the Solicitation of Charitable Funds Act requires all registered charities to submit a financial report. We talked already about it being on a 990, an EZ, or a PF, or our annual financial report forms, not the postcard. The IRS threshold for Form 990N is $50,000. So if you're less than 50,000 and you file that postcard, make sure you use our annual financial report form to submit your data. So here's what's required to be reported. You have to file specific itemized and support and revenue for, you have to tell us whether it's direct public support, indirect public support, government grants, program service revenue. And you also must report how much money you take in from fundraising events, whether it's from a company, solicitor company versus a council and a commercial co-venture. You also then have to specifically itemize program expenses. So your program services, it's important to know what your program service is. The program service is the money that an organization spends out on its charitable purpose, on the reason that it was formed. So if you are a food pantry, it's the money you spend to provide food and stock your pantry and carry out the business of giving the food away to or either other organizations or individuals that come in. So you have to disclose expenses related to program services, your public information expenditures, fundraising costs. So in general, we talk about some of this as management costs, so management and salaries. So you have fundraising, management, and program. Now you might have an organization who has an officer that is salaried. And if your officer is salaried and they spend part of their time going out and soliciting grants, writing grants, out there looking for fundraising, out looking for donations. They spend part of their time working in the food pantry, organizing, running it, overseeing the operations of it. And then they spend some of their time maybe on paying bills or something management related, whether it has to do with other employees or whatnot. Their salary would then be expended across all three of those columns. We run into a problem in our office where everyone says everything I do is for my program service expense. And now you might have very few organizations where that's actually the case. Usually it's a grant making organization that has that, where they just pay money out and maybe they have a parent company that pays their overhead. But think about it. Your management will be things like bank expenses, post office box rental, any employee salaries or costs related to the actual operations of the organization versus the charitable programs of your organization. So you have to think and organize your reporting in a way that says whether or not your your expenses are program management or fundraising related. And then finally, you have to submit a balance sheet to us. And it's important on your balance sheet to know that when you file a report, that whatever you say you end your fiscal year end with, it is going to be what you start your next fiscal year end. So some people will maybe not have the same dollar amounts when they end one year and then the next day they start. And for some reason, there's a discrepancy in it. So if there is, you have to make sure you can explain it, but make sure that if there's no explanation that they should be the same, you'll need to reach out to an accountant or a CPA for help on that. But you have to make sure that you carry your balances forward from year to year, and don't leave that area blank, and make sure that it does match up with your prior year, unless you have an explanation, and then you're welcome to go ahead and explain it to us.
Another question just came in that relates to raffles, Kim. How do you check your raffle registration status?
Okay, you can log into your dashboard. Excuse me, you can log into your dashboard and check your status right on your dashboard. It'll say that. There's also a raffle search on our website that you can use as well.
Okay, thank you.
One of the related to the financial reports, an accepted IRS form may not always be accepted by the state. So this can be surprising to people, where they send us their 990 and we say we can't accept it because program and total expenses are listed as equal on here. But like I said, there's very few organizations that actually have 100% of their expenses are for programming service. There's usually some management or fundraising expenses that need to be reported. So make sure that you are tracking your program expenses differently from your management and fundraising. Make sure that you're itemizing those out, and that you've got great internal tracking of what your expenses and revenue are, so that when you provide information to your CPA or accountant, or when you're filling out the form yourself, that you get them in the right buckets, in the right lines, so that you don't end up with a rejected. The most common rejection, there's two of them, and this is what I've been talking about, is the saying that all of your expenses are program related, or saying that you had a different starting balance at the beginning of your year than you ended the prior year with. So both of those reasons, both of those issues will come up most of the time. We hardly have rejections for anything other than that, those two items. So if you need help with explanation on that, you're welcome to reach out to us. We can definitely help you with that, or your accountant or CPA can help you with that as well. And that brings us to the end of the presentation, and I am open for questions.
Well, you do have a few more slides.
Oh, do I? I'm
Yes,
sorry.
you do. But before you move on, I would just make a comment on what you just went through from a financial standpoint. Is you just be aware that when you're talking to a bookkeeper or CPA, as any nonprofits out there, please make sure they are comfortable with fund accounting. Your accounting is very different than a for-profit entity. And what Kim highlighted as far as allocating expenses and income, and what you also have to be aware of is the difference between restricted and unrestricted funds. Is that you will obviously have to have someone who's familiar with those terms and how they are done. If you have, especially if you have a substantial amount of money flowing through, or you're starting to build momentum for your mission and fundraising and grants. So just do keep that in mind, that it is a very, I've had clients who have no idea, or had a bookkeeper who was great for a small business, but had no idea how to do bookkeeping for a nonprofit. It is a very different animal.
Yeah, I will add to that. Really great point. Often when we talk to the CPAs, they will say, we just fill out the form based on the information we were provided by the nonprofit. And so super important for the nonprofit to know how to categorize their money, because if you don't have an accountant that's really well versed in the nonprofit world, that can be what happens, is that they just are popping numbers in here and there based on just what's written down on paper, and not necessarily understanding information behind it.
Mhm. Okay, and I think you have like 2 more slides.
I forgot I have my, thank you for reminding me.
Yeah, there you go.
So we've got some red flags. Here's some things that can not only draw our attention, but other states report that these are pretty much some common red flags across the states. If we get a report that's, sloppy handwritten, has math errors, it's missing schedules, it just makes us have to look at the whole, the whole thing in greater detail. And we might, it's just a red flag that something's not right. Something is not maybe as complete as it could be. Revenue expenses are unusually lower or higher than prior reports. I just had one this morning that I looked at, and it's like prior year showing a assets in the 70,000 range, and all of a sudden 3,000, but there's no explanation anywhere on the report. And again, assets aren't matching up at the beginning of the year from the end of the prior year. And so it's just, these things just kind of build on each other. And so you look down at the bottom of that particular report, and I see that it was an officer that filled out the report this year versus an accountant that was filling it out the prior year. So these things, when you have these sudden changes, it causes us to have to look a little bit deeper to try and figure out where the problem is. Again, prior period adjustment not reported, expenses or revenue are not itemized. If you just say we took in 100,000 and we spent 80,000 and there's no explanation, that's going to have to be rejected because of not itemizing the information. Program service accomplishments are not described. So on the program service part of the report, whether it's ours or whether it's a 990, they ask you to describe your 3 biggest program accomplishments and the money you spent on them. What's the total money you spent on each one of those? This part of the form is where I tell people, this is where you brag on yourself. This is where you tell your story. This is where a nonprofit has to say, what did we do with all the money that we spent? Here's what we did. The public sees this information. And if you just put homeless shelter, and then you put a large amount of money over on the other side, that reads one way, versus we housed 183 men, 78 women, and 13 children over the course of 12 months. During that time, we served X number of meals and provided whatever else that you do, whether it's, health supplies or food or clothing. That reads a lot different, spending $80,000 versus homeless shelter, $80,000. These kind of details are where I'd say this is your opportunity to put it out there, where the public and so many people can see it. The people who are grant makers, the people who are the state people that are filing your information, putting out there for those that will now call us over the next 3 months, trying to determine who they want to give their money. Are they registered? How much, what does their financial report look like? We tell people, go to this area. So I would encourage you to be really diligent about that program service accomplishment area. It's page 2 of both the 990 EZ and the 990 full report. And it's actually page 2 of our internal annual financial report form. Use it to tell your story. It's probably the most important part, I think, of what the public looks at, because they look at that and they read that, because in some cases, we don't know what an organization does without looking at that. So best practice is stay in compliance with state
Tim,
and
a
federal
quick
law.
question that we
Yep.
have.
Yep.
Does the Secretary of State have a sample budget sheet that we can use to help fill out the form that needs to be put in?
We do not. We have to be very careful here. We're not accountants, so we cannot give advice, and having a sample budget sheet would fall there. But what I would suggest is pull our financial report form and just look at the information that we ask, because those are kind of the buckets where the IRS and us expect you to put your money. They're just kind of like large categories. And then some of it is broken down in little small areas, but look at the forms that you have to complete. And I would say, the same thing with, your raffle report. In advance of holding the raffle, look at the raffle report and so you can see what kind of information you have to report. That's just a good practice to do in general, is to just look at the reports and see what are you required to submit to us and the IRS. And that should really go a long way in helping you figure out how to, make your budget and figure out your spending costs and what they look like and how they're described.
Thank you, Kim.
Okay. Staying compliant to have a governing body. South Carolina State does require you to have 3 officers, like I said earlier. And you'll have to make sure, as Karen stated, be really careful on all the relations you have on that board, because it could severely affect voting abilities, quorum requirements when it comes to a meeting, and could provide an opportunity for extra scrutiny if there is an excessive amount of related individuals on the board. Know what your charitable purpose is. This is your program description. This is what I'd say to brag about yourself. Have a really good, solid answer as to what your charitable purpose is. Why is this organization formed? Why is it fundraising? What is it going to do with its money? And even when you're conducting a raffle, what are you going to do with the money? What is the reason you're fundraising? Transparency and communication within the organization. Make sure that you do have an active board. Make sure that there is not just one person who is in charge of the funds. It might be a good idea to have a second person looking at them, have 2 looking over the books, and just make sure that everyone's aware of what's going on. Let the organization's mission, vision, and values guide you. That should speak for itself. You want to make sure that everyone's focused on the same thing within the organization. And again, tell your story. Tell your story. The IRS has a fantastic website. The life cycle of a public charity and is available on the IRS website. It has all kinds of information in there about the requirements of a nonprofit organization, a tax-exempt organization that's registered with them, how to stay in compliance, what to do if you have questions or fall out of compliance with them, but also a lot of basic information, and past that for things like what to do with donation receipts. I mean, when do you have to give them? How can you give them? What do you do about unrelated business income tax? You might be formed for one reason, but you maybe have the opportunity to rent your building out to help generate some revenue for you and provide a need in the community, but it might not be related to your tax exempt status. They've got all kinds of questions like this that are answered on their website, and it's really well organized, and it's just a really great source of information for you. And I always encourage people to go there for that kind of information. Some more resources. I've got links for you here for the Solicitation of Charitable Funds Act, the Nonprofit Raffles Act, the IRS Life Cycle again, and IRS Tax Exempt Organization Search. So if you want to search your organization by EIN number or name, you can find out what your status is with the IRS. It shows you, sometimes you can find a copy of your determination letter in this menu if you need it. You can find the last filings that you submitted to the IRS. They'll be there for you to view and download if you need them, and just your overall status with the IRS. And if for some reason you search yourself and you find that you are had your tax exempt status revoked, they've got a way for you to contact them to find out what happened, when did it happen. Sometimes people get caught off guard when they go to this website and they realize that they have some things that need to be resolved with the IRS. So that actually is the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Kim, very much. So
You're welcome.
I know we're a few minutes after the hour, but we'll wrap up very quickly. Next slide, please, Kim.
Okay, there you go.
and the next slide. So we
Okay.
don't have any more questions. This is the almost next to last of our annual nonprofit workshops. Many of the things Kim just talked about, we actually had a workshop on. So we had a workshop on strategic planning, which obviously would help you with your mission, vision, and board management as to what are the roles and responsibilities of the board and marketing. Our next one is next week on grant writing. We're thrilled to have the Community Foundation of the Low Country giving that presentation, so please join us. And again, we do have, obviously, if you can't join us for that day, we will be sending out all of these. If you register, you will receive a copy of each presentation and obviously the recording. Next slide, please.
Mhm.
So we do have one more. We also do a marketing workshop, and the next one is on November 12th, and it's talking about the marketing evolution, old platforms and new strategies, as our agency has been a wonderful partner with us. So please join us. Next slide, please. We are always looking for volunteers as part of SCORE. We are all volunteers and we offer confidential advice to not only for-profits but nonprofits clients. But if you're interested in joining us, please reach out at score.org at SC Low Country. Next slide, please. And if you want to follow us on any of our social media platforms, please obviously do so. And next slide, last but not least, we are a resource partner of the SBA, so that we work with them with all of their various programs. But if you need anything from us, please reach out to SCORE. And I want to thank Kim again. I think there's one more slide. No, that's it. But anyway, I want to thank Coastal States Bank for their sponsoring of these events. And thanks, Kim, for spending the time with you. And again, please reach out if anybody has any questions, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.